Hi, and welcome to Love Sober Podcast, the podcast for the sober and sober curious. I'm Kate Baily. I'm a coach, an author, and I'm a Brit mum from West Sussex. Hi, and welcome back. And today it's me and Dufflyn. Yay! Hi, Dufflyn.
Hi. So happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here as well with you. And that we were just saying it's absolutely ages since we've seen each other because you went to the States to see your family, didn't you?
Yeah,
And
for a month.
for a month, yeah. And life's been busy here as well. So yeah, I'm really pleased to see it. And we're recording this. It's actually a alcohol awareness week here in the UK, which
I
is
didn't know that.
yeah. So that's interesting, and we'll put it out this week as well, because we wanted to dive into this thing before, but because of our schedules, we haven't kind of connected, have we? So yeah, we're going to dive into friendships. This idea of friendships in recovery or in sobriety, whatever language that you're using about that, because they're like massive, right? Our connections are so important.
It's true. No, it's such a big deal. And it's funny because I feel like, as a coach who works with relationships, I'm a relationship and recovery coach. I'm a love coach, but that also pertains to our friendships, outside of our primary attachment relationship, like outside of our partnership, our romantic partnership,
Mm.
100%.
Yeah. And I'm very interested as I've gone along the sober path. Um, I've become more and more interested in this idea of connection, connection to self, connection to other, connection to community. And as I've gone on throughout the last few years, I know that part of this, and this is like we need a year to talk about this again, don't we? I feel like, but this kind of learning how to, and I think it's a human thing as well, but I think it almost gets accelerated and put in the crucible when we're in sobriety or recovery. It's like often things feel quite heightened and sped up somehow. And if there's lessons to be learned, they seem like they're right there in our face. And so I don't know if that's the same for you or for other people, but I mean, definitely for me, I feel like, especially that first year was very intense. There were some very intense friendships happening. And I almost sort of saw it as kind of almost like when you go traveling and you're like, I'm going to meet you, and like you're literally my best friend for about 10 minutes. And it's amazing because we're having this amazing experience together. And then we'll just go our separate ways. And I sort of feel like some of my early sort of friendships were a bit like that. But we're going to kind of break it down, aren't we, to that sort of idea of when we are, how we make friends, because that's a big deal. How we make friends when we're really scared of losing our friends in real life, and what this sober people with two heads might actually be like behind these forums. Um, Keeping friends, when things get sticky or when things get wrong, and just kind of then pulling it all together, aren't we, in a kind of a summary and sharing our experience as well.
Groovy. I'm super excited to talk about it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I had similar experiences in early recovery because it was like what I realized was that my old friends oftentimes were drinking buddies.
Mm.
And and when I stopped drinking, we had nothing more in common. So I did have to make new friends. There were some friends, that have stayed with me through that were not drinking buddies, that were, genuine friends. But I think that's one thing that recovery teaches you is who your true friends are. So it's
Mm.
an opportunity in that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something we just when we were having a chat just for the pod, it was kind of that. this is a theme I think running through this, is that these are all like learning opportunities, aren't they? When people, people we love, people we connect to, people who we are attracted to, people kind of when we get hurt as well, what those learning opportunities are. And what is amazing is in sobriety or in recovery, we're often getting those tools together to learn how to do that, because we've probably been masking all kinds of stuff and all kinds of boundaries and all putting up with all kinds of stuff when we've been like drinking. And so it's almost like we're road testing kind of how to have friends again in a way. But I'm interested. So how did you meet your first kind of sober friends or friends in recovery?
My first friends in recovery, let me think back. I think for me, I mean, a lot of it was facilitated by the recovery program that I was a part of, for better or for worse.
Mm.
And we also, so the great thing about that was that we all had this big thing in common, right? And especially people who were getting sober around the same time as me, we were going through a lot of the same stuff. So we had a lot to talk about just naturally, which made it really easy to find that sort of sistership. But at the same time, I mean, I remember, for example, when I got my 5 years sober, and I remember, going to a big recovery meeting to celebrate, and my two best friends, it makes me emotional just thinking about it. My two best friends, who I've been best friends with since we were 12 years old, they came and, to present me with, my reward or whatever, as it were. So I made them a part of it too, even though they didn't really understand, not on the level that a lot of these other people did. They understood me, right? And they saw the change in me. And that was really important, to have that sort of through line, right? Yeah. And that's what I think, those friendships, because, I've heard people say like boyfriends come and go, but best friends are forever. And and sometimes that's true and sometimes that's not. But when you have friends that are lifelong friends, they're kind of a witness to your life in the same way that a partner is. And that's incredibly valuable and just so supportive in those moments when you need the support.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. And I kind of get, yeah, I had a similar sort of feeling. The way I kind of explained it was almost like the meeting of worlds for me. And that was quite recently, actually. It was the yoga community that I'm part of and the Love Sober community. And when I started doing the workshops with my dear friend Bryony, and she was like, yeah, I want to hear about all the sober stuff. And then the sober community were like, yeah, we want to hear about the yoga stuff and the day things. And I remember the first time sitting in that circle, feeling so, I don't know, just feeling this, yeah, meeting of worlds, this kind of congruency and convergence. It's the opposite of fragmentation, that coming together. Yeah.
Yes.
And and that's very, very validating as a self. It's like, oh, okay, this is feeling really solid now. All these little bits are coming together. But I feel like it takes, like, so for going back for me, for when I first, so I started by blogging on Soberistas. So when Soberistas, so this is going back, say 12, I think it's around 12, 11 or 12 years now. And so it really was before the explosion of the social media stuff. And obviously for yours is going way back to just in-person meetings, right? But so it was almost like having pen pals. So you'd blog and then people would respond on your blog. And then, this was all going, and then people would all sort of happen upon a blog and we'd all then start chatting. And that was very useful because we all had avatars. So a lot of people weren't sharing their real names at that point because I think we were years behind America in terms of like recovery being in any way kind of all right to talk about, even though it is still stigmatized. It's just like in the UK, you just literally you do not do that. It was not, there was not a thing. And so that was really, really interesting. I find that interesting. And the first time we all met up in real life must have been about 7 months into it. And that was absolutely terrifying. So I feel like things have come a long way since then. Yeah. And I feel like it was like, can you imagine like back in, like I'd go with me on this, but like, I feel like it was like the old fashioned pen pals back in kind of Victorian eras where you like wrote to each other. It felt like something like that. There's something very therapeutic. So there was quite a self, like it was almost like you were doing it alone, but not really alone. But it wasn't like okay, we're hanging out and being friends. So it was quite interesting with that. And so I had really in-depth pen pals that year. We would
Yeah,
write to each other every day, like literally.
that's so
And
sweet.
it was like a book could have been written by the correspondence, like in war times where you have the letters going back and forwards. It felt like that. So it was quite interesting in that.
Yeah, I remember reading a long time ago that women can have what they call romantic friendships, right?
Mm,
There is something just really tender and sweet about that, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's really special.
Yeah, really special. And yeah, so I think it's gone a kind of a long way. But what I do feel like is when I realized that I could make friends and could find those connections online and yeah, really sort of go, oh, okay, I really do feel like you're like me. That was essential. That was the piece. Um,
Hmm.
you know.
That didn't happen to me so much in recovery, but it did when I moved to France because when I started in recovery, there weren't online meetings. I'm so
Mm,
glad that there are now. I've met a lot of people who like got sober during COVID and, their first 2 years never saw another person in recovery in person until after COVID.
mm,
But for me, when I moved from the US to France 7 years ago, I didn't know anybody here. And so I had to make friends, and I wanted to make friends in English because I was struggling with the French language, right? And
mm,
and the culture. And it was just so much easier when I would talk to my friends back home. But most of my friends back home were in Los Angeles, 9 hour time difference. It's really tough to keep up with people, you know? And and so I started joining Facebook groups where there were like expat groups, different groups where I could jump in and and then I would just be like, hey, let's get coffee, and I started making friends. And you know what I've done? This is just in the last like year and a half. I've created this group. So we have a WhatsApp group now. But the WhatsApp group is called Dufflyn's Friends in Paris. It's
That's
just
like super, super like on the tin. It's like what it says on the tin, right?
right. It
You
is
know
what it
what you're
says it is.
getting.
Like quite literally.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's just like all my friends, and we get together about once a month, and I'll just organize something, like a lunch or whatever, so they get to meet each other. So now I also have community,
Yeah.
right? And most of them are expats, so we have that in common. But I think that that's the thing is like, communities where you have something big in common.
Mm.
And then from there, you figure out what else you have in common. But that was really, really big for me. And I'm grateful for those Facebook groups because that's how I've met most of the people who are
Mm.
now my closest friends here.
Yeah, thank goodness for that because actually few years, well, all of the people that I met that I really sort of chimed with weren't anywhere in my local community. But many of them, so one of my besties was in Australia, another one was in Minnesota. The other one was like up north in England, which you might as well be in Minnesota because of frickin' how bad the public transport is in the UK. It's probably quicker to get to Minnesota than it is to get up to York. Don't get me started. General election this week. Not going there. I am. No, I'm not. I'll go there later. Yeah, don't vote them in again. I've just thought that's all I've got to say. Don't vote them in again.
Oh, I
Vote
know
for the
it's
person.
everywhere. Oh,
Like I saw this brilliant, I will go there, a brilliant post that said, think about the most vulnerable person that you know and vote with their best interests at heart.
oh,
And I
that's
thought, we
lovely.
don't really need to say much more than that, do we? We don't need to tell people what to do. But if there's some kind of heart there, I think we know what to do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you went there. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That's off my chest so I can actually go back to it. Might, when is it? Anyway, I think it by the time this podcast comes out, it might have already happened. Because isn't it on the 4th? That's when this
You know,
podcast will come out.
oh,
It's
okay. I don't
exciting.
know. In France,
Mm.
there's an election on July 7th, the runoffs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't know.
So I'm
Anyway,
not sure in the UK.
not sure. That shows like how much I know. Never mind. So yeah. So there was that thing about distance, and I think what's happened in the UK over the last few years, it's been brilliant. Things like Club Soda have meant, I mean, they actually have a shop now that you can go and hang out in, and there's been sober clubbing. You went there, didn't you? Did you meet
I
Laura?
did. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks to you. I did go there. She wasn't there that day, but I met her bartender and I had a marvelous time. And I could see how they have a lot of community things going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's been absolutely amazing. So making friends, I mean, what kind of have you got any tips for people in terms of trying to make sober buds? What would you say?
I think they're the same tips that apply to all relationships, and generally my tips these days come from my experience with attachment,
Hmm.
because you can, your attachment style is going to apply whether we're talking about a work relationship or a friend relationship or a romantic relationship. And the first thing is, do you feel good when you hang out with that person?
Mm,
So like if you're hanging out with that person and then you leave to go home, check in with yourself and see, how is my body? Do I feel regulated? Do I feel calm? Do I feel safe?
mm,
Right? So that's like your baseline, is that you want to feel emotionally regulated around that person. And then the next thing is, can you take care of them in a way that feels good to them without it feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill?
mm,
And vice versa. So that what you have then is reciprocity, that
mm,
it feels good to you the way they're taking care of you. And it's not too difficult. It's not too hard for me to show up in the way you want me to show up. That's going to feel
mm,
good for you, right? So
mm.
that's kind
Yeah.
of your second step. And if you've got those two things, then it's going to be a lot easier to build a friendship that's going to be secure.
Yeah, that, and you're so great with all your kind of knowledge and expertise around attachment. I really appreciate that. And I feel like there's where the online space has opened up and developed as well. Like I see these like massive groups and they make me quite nervous because they're not regulated and they're not, people aren't checking in. So I feel like if you're going, a great place to start are online communities.
Mhm.
I know you've got one, I've got one. There are various ones, but if you're going for one of those and you're starting to build friendships, yeah, I feel like it needs to be like the flavor of the group needs to be well managed as well. Do you know what I mean? And have somebody who's checking in. So, for example, um, I know that when I was on one, like way back when, there's something went wrong. I've met up with this woman in real life, and she had ended up trolling me. I didn't actually want to talk about this for years and years and years because I was like, I don't want to be responsible for putting people off going to soap forums. Like, I didn't want to put a poison thing in the well. But actually, I think it's like we've said, it's quite important to talk about stuff because sometimes things do go wrong and you get all kinds of characters. So there's that I feel like if you're in a group, you'll want to have some strong leadership from and boundaries written into those sober, have a look at what you agree to and how if there's a strategy for managing disagreements because as we're building these the difference of opinion can come up, and actually sometimes you'll have, there'll be a post that maybe, contravenes one of the rules and is too much or whatever, and then you can get a little bit of support. So your community can support you, sort of thing. And you don't maybe need to have to go and have that, that's almost like building connection, isn't it? Rather than that sort of deep friendships. But so it's like, what is the community like? What are their kind of rules of engagement? And if you need to pass something up, you want to make sure that someone is checking in to make sure that happens, right? Creating responsible spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, like you and I have done groups together, so you
Mm.
know how I do that. And my group in Smart Love Society, we have a confidentiality pledge and group guidelines. So it's all very clear. It's all laid
Yeah.
out. Everybody has agreed to the same, rules of engagement, as it
Yeah.
were. And I'm there also reminding people in a group call about, hey, this is how we interact with each other, so that people get to practice that, which I think is a wonderful thing about these communities, because then they
Mm.
can take it out into the world.
Mm.
But the other thing I want to say about that is, because when I was new in recovery, I did not have any boundaries.
Yeah, me either.
I didn't know what
Yeah.
they were, and I was like, meh, whatever. So what I've learned now is there's a guy named John Dunbar,
Mm.
and he's created something called the Dunbar number. And so what he talks about is kind of the different levels of relationship. So we have the A relationships. This is somebody you share everything with.
Mm.
The B relationships, you talk to this person once a week, you share almost everything with them. And the C relationships, you talk to them once in a while, maybe, once a month or a couple times a year. You share things in common, you do things together, right? But you see the different levels.
Mm.
And when I was new in recovery, everybody was an A the moment I met them,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah, they're either an A or they're a Z, where there's so many like, okay, I'm just gonna not tell the truth and mask 100% all the time. There was no kind of
exactly.
authentic, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And no, I mean, that black and white thinking that goes
Mm.
with addiction. So it
Yeah.
makes sense. And of course, we were that way. And aren't we adorable? And we don't have to do that anymore. But
Mm.
where are we going to learn how
Yeah.
to, right? How to do it differently? And that's where I think, it also comes into play in terms of keeping friendships. Is you do need to learn that if you want to
Mm.
keep
Mm.
friendships, because sooner or later, somebody's going to cross a boundary, and how do you handle it? How do
Mm.
you have those conversations? Because that's how you create intimacy, whether, no matter what kind of relationship it is. So you create intimacy, like you said, not masking, but being honest, being sincere, being authentic. And we
And we
all
have,
need to.
yeah. When we don't know our boundaries as well, sometimes we don't know what's just where it is, what it is, till after it's been crossed, and you're like, oh, hang on, yeah, that's still staying with me. And then so it's such a piece in this, isn't it? And having so much patience and compassion for ourselves while we're learning this kind of stuff. And I love what you said about those online groups, so that you're learning, you're modeling, because obviously facilitated by professionals as well. But if we set out those kind of very clear protocols and good, best practice, I guess, um, I feel like it's really inclusive as well, because that makes me think of being neurodivergent, and those kind of spaces online. So it's like, being really clear about if you put the electronic hand up and the timings. So it's everything's kind of clearly contracted, which is a funny way, I think, because it doesn't kind of necessarily go alongside your normal friend conversation. If you were just sitting on a park bench or going for a walk, or whatever, it's a bit more fluid. But in a group, I think that, again, they're almost like little stealth boundary teachings, because you're like, oh, I can say that. I can say how long I want to stay. I can say, give you the timings. I can have clarity with, and that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't mean I'm bossing you about. I can just say, oh, so yeah, it's about this kind of clarity with each other. I don't know
And
if
learning to take turns, right? Because
yeah, I think that's probably a really good way of saying what I've just waffled on about. Yeah.
but see, that's that, and we're also doing it right now. Like that was so meta.
It was, yeah.
Because we're doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a thing. Like we've all had that friend who like talks for half an hour and she's just monologuing, and they're, and
Mm.
I mean, no.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily have to never see that friend again if we've got a way of communicating a kind of boundary with that.
Yes, yes, exactly. And figuring out how to do that,
Yeah.
right? Of like whatever it is,
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of us are like, we're so scared to like interrupt somebody, or we're so scared that we're going to hurt someone else's feelings, or that someone is going to call us a bitch, like God forbid,
Yeah.
that we don't stand up for ourselves
Mm.
in our friendships. And then it gets to a point where you're so pissed off that, yeah, you're like off with our head.
Yeah, yeah. So it's about working with your amber flags and your early signals and getting comfortable and familiar with those before they turn into red flags, fuck it buttons, and closed doors sort of thing.
Yeah, all those.
All of those. And do you know what's occurred to me as well? Because I think when people are early sober and starting to find those friends. Like it went back to what you said earlier about, the drinking buddies, realizing that you didn't have anything in common with them once you stopped. And I think that sets us up for quite a big fear that we don't have anything in common with people unless we drink. So this is like, okay, this is a leap of faith. I'm gonna see if there's anyone in the world that I still get on with without this thing. Um, and we're still in that very quick fix, immediate response mode often, aren't we? Our brains will be very much in that, like not having the cognitive flexibility to think really long term, not really having the confidence that these things, or the kind of trust that one foot in front of the other, and that the friendships can take a long time and they can evolve. So there's
Yeah.
almost this kind of weird section of need emergency there because we need to make those connections because we've got big needs. And then how does that breathe into those more long-term relationships? And actually, maybe often it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe you've got your very early crisis team friends. Then you've got, yeah, I'm much more chilled. I got this friends when you're a few years down the line. Who knows? What do you think about that? I'll throw
I
that
heard
thought
somebody
out.
say like a long time ago, a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And that really stuck with me because I was like, okay, a reason.
Love
We're
that.
sober together. Okay, great. We have a reason to be friends, right? And then sometimes it's a season because it's like, okay, in early recovery, this friendship suited me, but maybe it doesn't anymore. And it's okay if, if it doesn't anymore. And also, if the reason is gone, like if your reason for being friends with that person was because they worked in the cubicle next to you, or they drank at the bar that you drank at, and that's not happening anymore, then it's okay to let it go.
Mm.
You don't have to stay friends with somebody just because you once were friends with them, and then
Mm.
there are people who are with you for a lifetime. And I think that's the thing, is like figuring out who those people are.
I love that. Reason, season, or a lifetime. I love that. That's great.
It's a good
And
one.
what that is to me as well is almost like letting people with those things. It's like there's that sort of sage aunt who's just like, don't worry, sweetheart, it's fine, it's going to be fine. Because I think there's a lot of that fear, isn't there, at first, or there's a lot of judgment if we don't keep friendships going, or so I love that. It feels like a lovely bit of wisdom. Thank you for that, Dufflyn. Love
Yeah,
that.
and like I said, I can't take credit for that. It was my friend Deezer D, may he
Mm.
rest in peace, who is one of my closest friends in early recovery, who shared that with me, and it
Mm.
just always stayed with me. And I think too, in terms of like the online space has really helped me keep friends, like the friends that I want to hold on to, even if they're a B or a C, as it were. Um, just being able to see them on Instagram, sharing pictures of their kids, and even though I've maybe never met their kids, or I do a Marco Polo with them every now and then, or whatever it is, like those online spaces have helped me also, which I think gives me a sort of like consistency in my life, of
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that's who I was then. And I bring that with me everywhere I go. Like I also bring all of my experience with me everywhere I go.
Mm.
All of those friendships still count for something, even if I'm not close with them anymore.
Yeah. And I feel like that goes into my one of my loves, which is the research on micro connections. They don't feel so much like micro connections because they have once been, but it's almost like that kind of spider's web of connectivity and community that is there, and dropping in can really help boost those feelings of safety, connection. It's like the research on aging and longevity. It's like the micro connections in your community, if you've got that. And I think there'll be more research coming out about the online community as playing a part of that. Two, yeah, boosting, being one of the great markers of well-being and aging, So
Absolutely. I've had some beautiful moments with total strangers that I will never forget.
mm,
In the metro. Just yesterday on the street, I was walking past this girl and she had like headphones on or something. And she tripped on one of the stones in the street that they're like redoing the sidewalk because the Olympics are coming and everything must look perfect.
mm.
And and she looked at me and I looked at her and I said, C'est chiant ce truc. I was like, oh, it's annoying, that thing. And she was like, Oui, c'est vraiment chiant. And then she was like, yeah, yes, very annoying. And she just kept walking. We both kept walking, but it was just such a cute little moment,
Yeah.
right? Of like, yeah. So
Yeah.
I felt good because I was like, oh, I got to help her laugh about what could have been an embarrassing
Mm.
moment. So I was like proud of myself, right? That like I said the
Yeah. You
thing,
did say the thing, and
right?
I think that's another beautiful thing that comes out of sober time and recovery is that feelings of connectivity and the inevitable feelings of more agency and confidence is that you can do that with strangers, can't you? You can just like doesn't, we kind of feel I feel like that. Yeah, that kind of meta feels like more in reach, than it did. That
Yeah,
may I
meta
be well, may
security.
I be well. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
love that. Yes. Oh, meta. You mean that meta with two
meta,
T's?
not Facebook overlords, not those horrid meta, the two T's meta that we like.
I was meaning meta as
Oh,
opposed to like
metacognitive,
micro,
not
like meta.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
In the
Mm,
sense of like meta security of like
yeah,
feeling safe in the world in your
yes,
individual relationships, but feeling safe in the world in such a way that
yeah.
you can be authentic all the time with everyone.
Oh, yes.
But also
Yeah.
meta with two T's facilitates that, which is
Mm.
to say, yes, sitting with yourself and may I be peaceful. May they be peaceful. May all sentient
Mm.
beings be peaceful. 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
All the meta,
Of
except the
meta.
overlords, except the overlords.
Yeah. I want to salute out to myself, to you, to people who go onto a sober forum for the very first time. Like the bravery in
Mhm.
that, right? The
Mhm.
bravery that and then what's lovely is that, past, we go over the hurdle of fear and we do it and we take action. And then we realize that there are others on the other side who going, don't worry, I get it. We get it. You're in the right place, and that's practicing or witnessing, experiencing that meta that we're talking about, aren't we? The meta belonging in the world, in my individual unit, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah. Leap and then it will appear.
Ah. Oh, it's true though, and that is such a good metaphor for the sober sphere and the sober group. It really is. It really is. So, what about then? Well, we've kind of talked about keeping friends, haven't we? About, the season, or maybe it's, you know,
Mhm.
and I do think there is part of that. You will naturally vibe with people, and that sort of, you know, it's almost like you go off piece, don't you, with them. You know, I'm thinking about the online sober groups and being held in that space to have those almost B's and C's that are going on. Then you find you got your A's and you know, you're making friends. And for me, the sort of safety around that in terms of a sober perspective is just keeping the group there, is having a broad base. Because if you do fall out, or if there's a misunderstanding, or also they go back to drinking, right? They have a reoccurrence. So that's something that's happened to me that was very triggering just before Christmas, I think my first year. And it was like, oh, actually, I love this person. I still love her, but I can't I can't WhatsApp you because it's too triggering. So
Mhm.
that's interesting, right?
Yeah,
Keeping the
absolutely.
group there.
Well, because, and this is one of the things that Dunbar talks about, is that many of us in Western society, we have just one A and no B's and a ton of C's.
Mm,
So we're so overly invested in this one relationship that if something goes wrong there,
mm,
we really don't have much support.
mm.
And that's something to think about, you know, kind of developing a few stronger friendships, whether they're A's or B's, so that when you're struggling, you have somebody to reach out to. And, you know, reaching out to a therapist or a coach is great. And it's also just really valuable to have girlfriends that you can, you know, that you can bitch and moan to, frankly,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
And I did this to a friend on just Christmas Eve. We all had COVID this year. And the COVID thing was frying my head, and I was in quite a dark space. And I reached out to someone who's in the Love Sober community, and we hadn't done a lot of talking off the group, really. But I was like, I need her. I need to have a chat. And I got and it was for what was for accountability. I know what it was. It was my because I couldn't sleep, I was taking sleeping tablets, and my ones from my doctor. And I realized that I wanted to take this sleeping tablet. I felt so shit. I wanted to take the sleeping tablet at 4:30 in the afternoon just to knock myself out. And I was like, oh, I'm using this like wine. This is not like I've got insomnia and I'm going to bed at 11. And it was like, no, no. So that I got on the phone to her and was like, okay, I need some accountability here. I've just had this thought. I didn't think I did it. I didn't do it because obviously I had children. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny, Kate. But I yeah, and we had. You are laughing at me.
Doesn't make me laugh either.
But yeah, so she said that was so interesting, and that she was and I would say that she's become an A,
Oh.
funnily enough, over the last few months. So I think you're right, and I think those, yeah, building. I love what you said about building out the bees, you know, as well. Those looser connections, but that still we feel that we can go to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
Yeah.
that you've
And
got
they can
regular
come
contact.
to us, yeah, and investing in them and just, yeah, yeah. What about then? Um, yeah, so okay, so what if a friend, okay, we'll go there. What if a friend relapses, if we're using that word, drinks again, has a
Mm.
recurrence?
I've definitely had that happen a few times in recovery. And, you know, for me, it hasn't necessarily always been the same in terms of the way that the other person has moved forward. But a couple of them, two of them, they moved to a different area and they relapsed. And then I went to visit them, not knowing that they had a reoccurrence. And there I
Okay.
was, and I showed up and they were like, I have to tell you something, right? And oh my gosh, it was challenging for me because I was scared for them. And
Mm,
and obviously really cared about this person. And we, however, stayed friends for the next three
mm,
or 4 years while that
yeah.
person was actively drinking.
Mm,
And I wouldn't say that we were friends exactly the way that we used to be because we had shared recovery together, but I didn't throw the person out because they
Mm,
chose to drink. And
yeah.
I'm really grateful that I didn't, because this was a really dear friend. This was not a C,
Mm,
this was a B, this was a, someone who
mm,
was really precious to me. And when that person decided to try again with recovery, they felt safe to call me and
yeah.
ask for help.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason
Yeah.
why, for me, it was really valuable to maintain contact with them,
Mm,
even if that had never happened. And at the same time, there have been other people who I was maybe not quite as close with who had a reoccurrence. And, and so we no longer had a reason. You know what I mean?
mm,
The only thing holding me to that person was recovery. And if they weren't part of it anymore, I didn't really have a reason.
mm,
That said, if they had chosen recovery again and they had called me, I would have responded with open arms.
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
didn't continue to make a lot of effort in that friendship the way that I did with my dear friend. So I
Mm.
think there's lots of different ways that can go down. I don't know. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, and I was just thinking, just as you said that, it mirrored the other relationships that, people can be A's, B's, and C's, and so there's a nuance there in terms of, how we might go about it. I also think that it depends where you are in your recovery journey or sobriety. So for me, when it happened to this one particular friend just before Christmas, we'd both had a recurrence, like we'd both gone back to drinking and we were buddying up to get through Christmas. And then she had gone back to it. And what I found very difficult was this, like, there was a positivity about it. Actually, it was really nice. I went out with my husband and we had this lovely time and and it was hugely triggering. It was like, well, hang on, we were buddied. And then I had positive messages around drinking coming from a sobriety buddy. So
Wow.
that was like, okay, sweetheart, you do you, but I can't like have these chats because this is gonna throw me off. So let's call it a day for now. And that was a boundary. That was a non-negotiable for me because I had to prioritize it. I was like, if I go back again, that's it. Um, so I would say, that's that checking in with yourself, having a broader group so that, and what you were saying, those B's and C's, and just knowing that that's that can be really difficult. It can make, because those earworms can start. Then you can go, oh, that's well, yes, I'm sure. Well, I know, okay, if X and Y is fine, then I'm sure I'll be fine. And we've got so much in common. So it's going, it's like, okay, that had to happen for me. I had to just go. And I had someone do that to me when I went back to it early days after that year, my pen pal. I mean, she was
Mhm.
still like touched base a bit, but the reason, like you said, the reason was gone. She couldn't acknowledge where I was in that because I needed to do a bit of toing and froing to understand where I was to make the decision then to come back to sobriety. And thankfully, 8 years this month. I'm clapping
Yay!
me. I'm clapping
Bravo,
me.
Kate!
But yeah, so she wasn't the right person in that because I could have been very triggering for her. And she's like, oh, I'm not going to celebrate you having a look around those parts, which sounds like a euphemism, but it was not. It was, it was. So I love that thing, what you said about reason, season, or life, because actually I think if we identify where that person is or where, what we need at that point, that can be a really good guideline for people of how to interact,
Mhm.
I think
I
that's
mean,
very useful.
ultimately, like what we're talking about is just being more conscious
Yeah.
about choosing our relationships rather than just going with whatever
Mm.
because it's there,
Yeah.
but choosing it. And I don't know about you, but I like feeling chosen.
Mm.
So, and
Yeah,
right, I like feeling when I know
totally.
that, right, that like someone is making the effort. Like my two best friends since we were 12 years old, they still send me birthday cards and a Christmas
Mm.
present every year, even though I'm 6,000 miles away. And right, and they make a really conscious effort to maintain that friendship, and it is so valuable to me. I mean, that is an example of secure attachment.
Mm. Yeah.
So valuable to me. And one of those girls I had a huge falling out with when I was in high school, because, and this is because of my sex and love addiction, basically, I got a boyfriend when we were 14. And this girl and I had been inseparable prior to that, like just every single day after school together. And suddenly I got this boyfriend and I started hanging out with him all the time. And she wanted me to go to this concert with her. And I had been flaking on her repeatedly, but this was the last straw. And so then for the next 3 years of high school, she wouldn't speak to me, even though we were on a cheerleading squad together, wouldn't speak to me. And it was incredibly painful, because I knew that it was my fault, but I was still with the boy, you know, and I tried to like talk to her. I tried to repair it. She had it with me, and she wanted none of it. And she was not wrong. So we had these like sports fitness evaluations at school one day. And I think this was junior year or senior year, I can't remember. And so we're running around this track, and you had to do a certain number of laps. And the whole time I was running right behind her, right behind her, right behind her. And we got right to the finish, and I was like, "Rrr." And I went through and I beat her to the finish line. And I was like, ha, take that, frenemy, because she had become like the frenemy, right? You know what she did? The next day, she went back and ran the whole thing again in order to beat my time.
Ooh, okay.
Right? So for me, what that shows me is that, you know, someone who is a frenemy can either hurt you or help you. And there's actually science that backs this up because I've checked it out. Depending on like if you have a common goal. Right. So in that instance, we had the common goal of finishing, right, and doing our best time. They can push you to be better than yourself, right? To be the best that you can be. It can also hurt if that's not the case, you know, if it's just pressure and anxiety and insecurity, then no, that's not helping anybody. But you know, a few years later, I ended up at a party with that girl, and we finally spoke. And you know, I made a big effort at that point to repair the friendship. And so this is one of my best friends still. And you know, I was a bridesmaid at her wedding, and you know, yeah, all the good feelings now. But it was such an important lesson to me because I almost lost that friend because of a boy.
Yeah.
You know, and I realized also how valuable that sort of the competition when it's good.
Yeah.
But also I saw, especially in early recovery, that I chose women where there was competition when it's not good. I chose a lot of really unsafe women to be friends with in my early recovery who were frenemies in the bad way.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Did you
I
ever?
love that story, by the way. It was so like I felt like I was watching a film. I thought I was like in Mean Girls, like on the track, you know, like I love that film. I might have to watch that film tonight. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd say that there was that one who trolled me. Yeah, and I've experienced the odd frenemy. I'd say not very many, but the odd frenemy, sober space, and and an old friend who I don't sort of have really anything in. And once I started developing boundaries, I think that was when it was like, okay, because I think I have a habit of I go back for more. You know, like if someone hurts me, I go back and try and fix. And then I go try and fix, and I fix a bit more. And I think if I work really hard, then I'll be able to do it. And so for me, part of my thing is that boundary of like, okay, I need to do nothing right now. Like this is not my job. So, and that is something that I feel like I've been with my husband for getting on for 30 years now. And He's been a great teacher. My children have been a great teacher in terms of boundaries. And I had this thing with women where I think I've just, like, my attachment with men was all over the place. No modeling going on in my childhood. And so women have kind of been my safe space. So when I've had a frenemy that's been a woman, it's felt like my biggest betrayals. It's cut deep because I'm like, I trusted you, like I trust you. And so there's been that kind of loyalty, trust axis there because I'm very loyal. But is that what I've had to go is like, okay, am I being loyal or am I not having boundaries here? So this is big learning for me. This is really big. It's like big girl pants time for me.
Very big girl pants.
Really big girl pants. And I'm sort of like, I have friends again that I'm very close to. I had a friend recently, and we realized it was so beautiful because it was sort of around we do collaborate, we do some work together, and she's had a thing in the past where she has been really burnt by a frenemy who betrayed in business and stuff like that. And we were working on something together, and I was thinking, why have I got a little bit like, oh, I bet she hasn't got back to me, a bit like, oh, got set off a little bit of insecurity. Oh, okay, have I gone too far? Have I been too many texts? Have I not been enough texts? And I was thinking, hang on, there's something going on here with me. And the next time I sat down and I went, okay, I'm just really scared. Like I'm like and she's an A, right? I was like, just have to be honest with you. I'm freaking out because if we fall out, then I can't come here anymore and you'll realize I'm shit. And then, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? She was like, that's just literally it's never gonna fucking happen. And you know what? I'm scared too. I'm really scared too. We're like, okay. And we did a little bit of a contract. We're like, okay, I won't do this and you won't do that. And okay, and if this happens, I'll let you know this. And if you need just to not have any texts on Monday to Thursday, because you're just let me know, and we did a little bit of contracting around our friendship. And that felt really beautiful. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe this is what we do as grown-ups, what we
That
can
is some
do.
major adulting, Kate Baily.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
so,
really gorgeous to be able to do that. And I feel like for me now, I'm just like we were talking about, I'm a lot more conscious about choosing the friends that I really want to invest in because listen, we are busy.
yeah, we are.
Right? And the older I get, the more I see that time is the one
Mm,
most precious resource that I have. And who do I want to spend it on? And right, who do I want to be close to? And if something doesn't feel right or it doesn't feel balanced, it doesn't feel reciprocal, if I don't feel heard, if I don't feel seen by that person, that it's okay to move on, and I don't have to turn the other cheek because I've invested years in this person either, right? And that I can be authentic and vulnerable like you were with your friend and see how they respond and see
yeah.
whether or not they're both willing and capable to do the repair that's necessary. Because that's going to happen. If you're friends with somebody long enough, there's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
It's not about whether there's an issue, it's about how you handle it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And recognizing what type of a friend the other person can be, and then you adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I love this conversation, and I just feel like it's a good conversation for all of us to be having, about how to, bearing in mind that those relationships are so important and so key. And there's all that data around longevity, well-being, connection in terms of sobriety being just absolutely essential. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's
And
that
knowing
thing
that
that's
almost
where
that, sorry, go, I was going to say that I'm glad we talked about it because you can also sometimes think everybody else is doing really well. It's one of those arenas where you're like, well, no one else is having these insecurities or, something going on. So what does, and we can really get in our own head about it and just to have some kind of nod to it, that things can go awry, that things can work out, you know. That I love that, what you said about, I just think as we go on, we kind of get better at those boundaries and, knowing the attachment issues, like you're saying, the attachment style is real power knowledge, I think,
Mhm.
you know. And also this kind of, I think if, having that grit, I was thinking about, when I do yoga for ages, like, so I'm quite introverted, and I don't like a lot of chat and face to face, in real life. And say, for example, in the yoga studio, if I'm doing yoga together, a yoga nidra is one of my most powerful things. Like, so I've just recently realized that growing up, I have a message that there is not enough. There are not enough of us. So in terms of the tribe, so we're a very small family, moved around, naval family, then dad, split up. And yeah, and we were away from a wider kind of family. So that is in one of my like drivers or messages. It's like there's not enough of us. Um, and when I do, but then it's like, oh, well, how do I access enough of people? So if I'm doing like a yoga nidra or a yin class, when we're all having a nap together and there's the yoga teacher keeping a lookout, like the alpha, like I just feel like I'm a monkey in my group of lovely monkeys in a tree and we're all having a nap together. That's very soothing on the nervous system. And
Mm,
if I'm doing things like that as well, like I don't have to be getting on with everyone and having amazing conversations with everyone, but I could go hang out with people and that can fill up some of that connection bucket. So then I'm less likely to overshare with someone who's not my A, or do you know what I mean? So it's almost like looking at
yes,
it holistically, I guess, is where I'm coming to.
absolutely. It's just the need that we have for community and connection and tribe,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? To have that sense of belonging. That's a deep human attachment
So
need.
deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say as well, so if people are, thinking about, bearing in mind this is dry July, you might be looking at this for the first time. You might be looking for resources, that knowing that, I feel like some of that can maybe quell some of the fear around it, knowing that it is a big deal, that you are going to want to connect, that we are sold alcohol with the messages, you cannot connect without me, you can't have fun without me. So we're going to be like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, where are my people and how am I going to be connected and have fun? And that, yeah, so that the sober community can really support with that, right? They can really help, and there are really lovely friendships to be made. And we're all walking each other home, right? Like,
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah, you said it. We're all walking each other home. So it's just a walk. It's just a
just a
day.
walk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all good.
yeah.
We don't have to do it
Ah,
perfectly.
so yeah, I feel like we've kind of covered most of the things that we were going to talk about. But if you got anything that you would end on that you felt like you wanted to share.
The only other thing I think there's a famous couples therapist named Esther Perel who says the
Mm.
quality of your relationships determine the quality of your life,
Mm.
which always resonates so much with me. But I feel like that doesn't just mean your relationship, meaning your romantic relationship. It's all your relationships. And I feel like there's even a whole nother episode we could do about business relationships and business boundaries. So that's for another
Yes,
day.
please.
Right. But I was like, you
I
you
need
kind
that
of touched on
task.
it. And I was like, oh no, that's a whole other bag of worms. So we'll save that back
Yeah.
another day of fishing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, because that can
Yeah.
happen when we're making all those connections, who knows where they lead. And
Mhm.
so there have been a lot of, like, I've seen a lot of connections and couplings over the sober community and people going into the business together and stuff like that, for sure. Yeah, yeah. And that is, well, maybe we should do that another time. So, yeah, what's your reason to love sober today, Duff?
Mm. My reason to love sober today. I've been thinking a lot lately about how lucky I am. My gratitude lists are always a long list of names of people that I love. And I'm so grateful right now that like my romantic partner, my mom, my dad, my brother, both sisters, and my two best friends, these are my A's.
Yeah.
Right? That the people that I call family, and my sponsor, are all healthy and well, and I'm on good terms with all of them. And I feel so loved, and I'm really grateful for that. And it wouldn't be possible if I wasn't sober.
100%. I love that. Oh, it's
Oh,
beautiful.
thanks.
And I think my reason to love sober is a similar connection thing. I think that, you know, there's been a very tough few years in my family. And the last few days, I've done a lot of driving around with my son and his girlfriend to go in water, to get in bits of water. And just catching those moments together, those moments. And it didn't seem possible this time last year. That wouldn't have been seem possible that we could even have a day out together. And we just had this lovely time. And yesterday I went to a beautiful place in Sussex called Parham House with my mum. And I got a lovely picture of him and his girlfriend and my mum all together. And it's, you know, I just feel like these are precious days. And I get to do that. And I've got, you know, no matter how difficult it's been with all the, you know, neurodivergence and substance use and, you know, all the real difficulties, I feel like I have been able to be that a constant, you know, through my sobriety. It's like I show up every day the same. And that's huge. That's huge in our family for sure. So yeah.
Breaking the chains.
I hope so. Breaking the chains, yeah. I won't sing Fleetwood Mac. Chain came into my head then. Who's that? I love that tune. Okay, so
Never break the chain.
never break the chain. All right, my love. So we will see you soon on the Love Sober podcast. Stay safe, everyone. If you're immediately concerned about your drinking, reach out and get support. It is Alcohol Awareness Week this week in the UK, and Alcohol Change UK have some amazing resources on their website. They're looking at myth busting, what we're told about alcohol and what actually it does. So I just feel like they're such a great resource at the moment. So head over to change.uk, Alcohol Change UK, and we'll see you next week for more chat.